Welcome to Stories with Agnes, a space where life becomes art, and every word is a window to emotions, dilemmas, and revelations. Today, I bring you a profound story, a narrative about how some people come into our lives to teach us lessons, not to stay. About how, sometimes, we must go through fire to learn to love ourselves. If you've ever wondered how to move on from a lost love, how to find the strength to say no, or how to rebuild yourself after your heart has been broken, this story is for you. So, grab a cup of tea, make yourself comfortable, and let yourself be carried away by the words. Because sometimes, the greatest lessons come from the most unexpected stories. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more stories that will touch your soul. We're here to share, inspire, and create together a community of people who believe in the power of words. Enjoy the story. Never turn to one man to forget another. Use two or three. That was the advice my mother had given me in a calm yet authoritative voice as she brushed my hair over my shoulders, as if she wanted to straighten not just the strands but also my thoughts. But I hadn't listened to her. And now, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone that hadn't vibrated for hours, I realized how right she had been. It was a cold autumn evening, and the window was fogged up from my impatient breath. I was waiting for a message from Adrian, the man who had made me forget about Andre, the one who had hurt me so deeply that I thought I'd never recover. But Adrian, who had seemed so perfect at first, had now become just as distant and unpredictable as his predecessor. And I, in my foolishness, realized I was repeating the same mistake, placing all my hopes in one person, leaving myself vulnerable and exposed to yet another disappointment. The phone suddenly rang, making me jump. It was an unknown number. I answered with a trembling voice, hoping to hear even a sign of life from Adrian. But it wasn't him. It was Alex, an old friend I had known before Andre, before all this chaos. He wanted to know if I was okay, if I wanted to grab a coffee and talk. I agreed without hesitation. When I saw Alex, I realized how much I had missed the company of a man who had no expectations, who didn't make me feel like I had to be someone else. He was relaxed, funny, and for the first time in a long while, I laughed without thinking about Adrian or Andre. Then Victor appeared, a coworker who had texted me asking if I wanted to go to a concert. I said yes, why not? During that period of my life, I spent time with Alex, Victor, and even another friend, Daniel, who had invited me to an art exhibition. Each of them offered me something different. Alex made me laugh, Victor pushed me out of my comfort zone, and Daniel taught me to see the world through different eyes. And, in a strange way, I began to feel more whole. I no longer waited for one person to fill the void, because I realized no one could do that. Only I could. Then, one day, Adrian reappeared. He wanted to meet, to talk. But, to my surprise, I didn't rush to respond. Because this time, I knew I didn't need him. I didn't need anyone to define or save me. Instead, I had a community of people who supported me, each in their own way. And maybe that was all I needed. So, when my mother asked if I had followed her advice, I smiled and said, "Yes, Mom. This time, I've learned the lesson." And, for the first time, I felt truly free. I met Andre at a party on a summer evening filled with light and music. He was the kind of man who attracted attention effortlessly, with a smile that seemed to promise adventure and mystery. He enchanted me from the first moment. We talked for hours, laughed, danced, and I felt as if the universe had narrowed down to just the two of us, leaving out everything superficial and insignificant. 6 months. That's how long our great love lasted. 6 months during which I thought I had found everything I was looking for, only to discover, on an ordinary day, that he was already married. I found out by chance, through a conversation with a friend who knew him from another context. Her words struck me like lightning. "You know Andre is married, right?" I didn't want to believe it. I tried to deny it, to find excuses, but the truth was there, raw and merciless. I felt my world crumbling around me. How could he have lied to me? How could I have been so blind? After that, I fell into a deep depression. I spent my days crying, looking at our photos, and wondering where I had gone wrong. I felt like I couldn't live without him, like my life no longer had meaning. I wanted to disappear, to feel nothing. My friends told me to move on, that time heals all wounds, but I didn't believe it. Time seemed to have stopped for me, and the pain was so intense that I felt suffocated, and then I met Adrian. He appeared like a ray of light in my darkness. He was different from Andre, calmer, more attentive, more present. We became friends, spent time together, and gradually, I began to forget about Andre. Adrian made me laugh, made me feel alive again. But, unfortunately, our relationship remained platonic on his part. He gave me attention, offered me support, but he didn't want more. And that made me suffer again. Why couldn't he see me the way I saw him? Why couldn't he love me the way I loved him? I began to wonder if I would ever find someone who would truly love me, without lies, without games. I felt trapped in a cycle of pain and disappointment, and I didn't know how to break free. My best friend, Maria, told me to stop putting so much pressure on myself, to focus on myself, but it was hard. I felt like I needed love, validation, someone to make me feel important. One day, while I was waiting for a sign from Adrian, my phone vibrated. It wasn't him, but Alex, an old friend I hadn't seen in a long time. His message was simple but warm. "Hey, I'm in town for 2 weeks. Want to grab dinner?" I replied without hesitation. I needed a distraction, someone to pull me out of the exhausting cycle of waiting and disappointment. That evening, Alex and I went to a small restaurant tucked away on a quiet side street. The atmosphere was relaxed, and the conversation flowed easily, as if between friends who had known each other for years. He didn't ask complicated questions, didn't have expectations, and didn't make me feel guilty or incomplete. He was just there, present, and that was enough. After dinner, we walked through the quiet streets of the city, talking about the past, dreams, and simple, beautiful things. And when we reached my apartment, I decided to continue the evening there. It wasn't a calculated decision but rather a natural impulse. I needed tenderness, closeness, someone to touch me without asking for anything in return. Alex was that someone. He was calm, attentive, and didn't pressure me. In my bedroom, the world seemed to pause for a moment. There were no lies, no games, no unrealistic expectations. It was just us, two souls meeting in a moment of vulnerability and mutual understanding. The 2 weeks I spent with Alex felt like a mini vacation from my ordinary life. We walked through parks, explored new places, laughed until our stomachs hurt, and shared moments of intimacy that weren't weighed down by promises or fears. He didn't make me feel guilty for not being able to offer more, and I didn't feel pressured to be someone I wasn't. It was a simple but deep connection, based on respect and the desire to enjoy each other's presence. When Alex left, I expected to feel a void, pain, or disappointment. But that didn't happen. Instead, I felt light, full of energy, and a sense of well-being I hadn't experienced in a long time. I wasn't crying over him, wondering what could have been, or feeling abandoned. Instead, I was grateful for the beautiful moments we had shared and for the fact that he had come into my life exactly when I needed him. This experience taught me something important, that I didn't have to place all my emotional pressure on one person. That I could find fulfillment and joy in multiple places, in multiple forms. Alex wasn't the next Andre or the next Adrian. He was just Alex, a friend who helped me through a difficult time without asking for anything in return. And maybe that was all I needed to learn to appreciate temporary connections, to live in the present without clinging to the future. After he left, I kept moving forward, but with a new perspective. I wasn't looking for someone to save me or make me happy. Instead, I allowed myself to be open to new experiences, to new people, without assigning them more meaning than they had. And, in a way, that made me feel stronger, freer. At work, life was busy, but I didn't complain. I was earning well, and the days flew by in a whirlwind of projects and meetings. I didn't have time to breathe, but that didn't matter. I felt productive, useful, and that gave me a sense of satisfaction. One day, my boss announced that she was hiring 2 more people to handle the workload. And that's how Victor came into my life. Victor was new to the team but fit in easily. He had a relaxed demeanor, a smile that seemed to say everything will be fine, and an energy that was contagious. It didn't take long for me to notice him glancing in my direction, and though I was initially hesitant, I began to respond with the same curiosity. One day, after we finished an important project, he invited me to a concert. Why not? I thought. I needed a break, something to pull me out of my daily routine. The concert was amazing. The music was energizing, and the atmosphere was full of life. We had a few beers, laughed, danced, and I felt free, carefree, and without a worry in the world. When it ended, we headed home, but when we reached my apartment door, the wave of emotions I had been feeling for a while took over. And so, we spent a passionate night together. In the morning, the light streaming through the curtains brought a sense of clarity. Victor was sleeping peacefully, and I thought about what had happened. I didn't regret it, but I knew I couldn't let this moment take on more significance than it deserved. When he woke up, I thanked him for the evening but made it clear that he shouldn't have any expectations from me. He smiled, nodded, and left without saying much. After that, things at work continued as usual. Victor didn't do anything to make me feel uncomfortable or pressured. He was just as relaxed and friendly as before, and I appreciated that. I had learned to live in the moment without clinging to it, without turning it into a burden or an expectation. Life went on, and I was determined to live it on my own terms, without letting others define my happiness or worth. And maybe that was the most important thing I had learned up to that point. After Victor came Daniel. I met him at an art exhibition he invited me to. He was a calm guy with a clear passion for art and a way of speaking that made you listen with interest. We spent hours discussing paintings, sculptures, and the hidden messages in each piece. And, like with the others, our encounter ended in my bedroom. But this time, things were different. I wasn't pouring my soul into every interaction. I wasn't looking for salvation or validation in the other person's eyes. Instead, I was living my life, accepting each moment as it came, without assigning it more meaning than it had. This was the stage where I began to accept that life could be lived differently. I was no longer willing to give everything without receiving anything in return. So, when Daniel gave me my first gift, a beautiful bag I had admired in a store, I accepted it without guilt. Then came clothes, jewelry, short trips to exotic places. I combined the pleasant with the practical, and for the first time, I felt in control of my own destiny. I no longer waited for someone to make me happy. I allowed myself to be happy in my own way. Now, looking back, I see that each of those men played a role in my life. Andre taught me to be cautious, not to lose myself completely in love. Adrian taught me to appreciate friendship and not to put all my eggs in one basket. And I taught myself to love myself, to be enough for myself. One day, however, Adrian reappeared. His message popped up on my phone screen like a reminder from a past I thought I had long closed. He wanted to meet, to talk, to clarify things. But, to my surprise, I didn't rush to respond. I didn't feel that thrill of emotion, that impatience that used to overwhelm me at his slightest touch. This time, I knew I didn't need him. I didn't need anyone to define or save me. I took a few days to reflect on everything that had happened between us. Adrian had had the chance for us to be together, to build something real, but he had chosen to lie to me, to keep me in the shadows, to offer me only pieces of himself, never the whole. And now, after his divorce, he suddenly remembered me. As if I were a backup plan, an option he could turn to when the rest of the world turned its back on him. But his ship had sailed long ago. I was no longer the same woman who waited for messages, who lost sleep analyzing every word he wrote. I was no longer willing to accept his games, to settle for the scraps of affection he occasionally threw my way. Instead, I was living my life, building a world where I was enough for myself. When I finally replied, I was firm but polite. I told him there was no need for us to meet, that we had nothing left to discuss. He tried to insist, to find reasons why we should see each other, but I stood my ground. There was no anger in my voice, no regret. Just a clear understanding that some chapters in life must be closed to move on to the next. Life is a journey, and love is only a part of it. I've learned not to seek happiness only in others but to find it within myself too. And maybe, one day, I'll meet someone who will love me as much as I love myself. But until then, I'm fine. I'm whole. I'm free. Today, I sit on a sunny terrace, enjoying a coffee with my mother. She asks me the same question she's been repeating since I was little. Did you follow my advice? I smile and calmly reply, yes, Mom, I listened to you. Her eyes shine with pride and understanding because she knows what I've been through and how I've become who I am today. Some might judge me, thinking I'm a frivolous, superficial, or self-interested woman. But I don't see it that way. I didn't break up families, I didn't take someone else's man, I didn't lie or manipulate. I simply learned to live life on my own terms, to accept that some connections are temporary and don't have to be filled with drama or unrealistic expectations. After so many disappointments, someone, or rather, a series of someones opened my eyes to the fact that there are other ways to live, to love, to be. And I want to thank my mother for that. She, who was also disappointed by my father, showed me that life doesn't have to be defined by the pain others cause. She gave me the strength to choose a different path, to be honest with myself, and to no longer allow anyone to dictate my worth or happiness. So now, when I look back, I see a woman who has learned to love herself, to create her own happiness, and to not be afraid to live life on her own terms. And maybe that's the most important thing you can do, to be yourself, without regret, without fear, without compromise. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of this story full of lessons and emotions. If you saw yourself in this story, or if it inspired you to look at certain aspects of your life differently, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment about what lesson you took from it. Every story has the power to connect us and make us feel less alone. I look forward to seeing you in the next story, where we'll explore new adventures and perspectives together. Until then, remember, your life is your story. Write it with courage and honesty. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss an episode. Thank you for being with me today.